All right, guys, today we're going to talk about fair value gaps, or FVGs. Now, this is an ICT concept. In other words, it's something that we can use in our trading to help us find setups. Now, a fair value gap is how it sounds. It's basically there's a gap between price. And I'm going to show you how to find these and how to use them with your trading every single day. So a fair value gap is basically, it's the gap that's created between a series of 3 candles. And this gap is significant because what's inside of here is there's a lot of shares. There's liquidity resting in here. And that's good because this is a spot where price can go attack later. So here's how kind of what it looks like in real time. So let's say I'm looking at the chart here. This is on the 1 minute. And I have here a fair value gap. Okay. Boom, boom. How do I know that's a fair value gap? Because I have candle number 1 here, candle number 2 here, and candle number 3 here. And there's a gap that's left in between candle 1 and 2. That's all fair value gap is. It's a gap between candle 1 and candle 3. There's a little bit of an art to this with fair value gaps, but we'll get into that in a second. So here's a fair value gap. I'm gonna go ahead and mark this out and draw it across. And now what's cool about these is it will give you a reference point when price is moving throughout the day like such. It'll give you a reference point to say, hey, this is an area I need to watch when price gets towards it. So as we get towards that fair value gap, you can see 1 or 2 things happen. 1, we're either going to respect the fair value gap, so we're going to come up to it, respect it, and then reject. Or 2, you can disrespect the fair value gap. So we're going to go through it and then blast through it. And this is nice. It gives you something to reference when price is moving in the middle of the chart. So in this example here, let's play this out. So in your opinion, this is live price, by the way. In your opinion, what would you say we're doing with this fair value gap right now? Would you say we're respecting it or disrespecting it? Right? The answer is we're respecting it. Price traded right up into this blue box, and you can see, I mean, look at the precision here. You can see to the tick, it is respecting this thing. And here is the power and why you need to learn fair value gaps. So let's go through a few examples of fair value gaps, and I'll kind of show you the low versus high quality ones. Now, one thing you want to be careful with when you're learning fair value gaps, okay? This is where I see a lot of people run into trouble. And trust me, I did this myself when I first learned about fair value gaps, just because it's a new concept. You have to train your eye to see this. And this is where you're gonna need screen time. Let's go through an exercise and kind of mark all the fair value gaps, right? There's a fair value gap here, right? Here's candle 1, here's candle 3, here's a gap in between. So there's a fair value gap. There's another one here. Why isn't there one here? Here's candle 1, here's candle 3. Why wouldn't that be a fair value gap? It's because there's no gap there. Here's another fair value gap. There's one right here. Here's how to avoid going stir crazy with fair value gaps. I just try to keep it simple, guys. I try to mark the most obvious ones because typically the more obvious a fair value gap is, the more valid it is. Okay. The easiest way you can find these is with these big displacement candles, right? Big candles are kind of the easiest way to find fair value gaps. Going back to this example here, right? Fair value gap here. Fair value gap here, right? Well, KP, how do I know which one to keep on your chart? They're both valid. And in fact, what I like to do is if they're right next to each other, I like to combine them. But going back to my other point, right? What's low quality versus high quality? Well, let me show you. Here's a fair value gap right here. See how tiny that is? See how small it is versus this fair value gap right here. Look at this tiny fair value gap here. Yes, it's still valid. Price can disrespect or respect it. You can see that price disrespected this, and then we push a little bit higher after the fact. So it's still valid, but you want the higher quality ones because, again, your chart's just going to end up full of fucking boxes. So you want to keep it simple. And look what happened right when we returned to this fair value gap in this example here. We tapped right into it, respected it, and then continued further down. So that is the power in fair value gaps. Now, if you're struggling to find these, here's one tip, or I guess 2 tips I would give you. The first thing is look for dumb, obvious candles. Look for big, I call them glizzy candles. They're technically called Marabuzo candles. Look for big candles, and you want to find the gap in between the first and the third candle. So the big candle should be your second candle. Another tip is simply just wait until price gets back into this. The fair value gaps give you a region on the chart to see if price respects it or disrespects it, okay? Now this works on every time frame, and I'll show you an example from today, in fact, and show you just how powerful these fair value gaps can be. So today, for example, let's go ahead and mark the fair value gaps here. So we have a big 15-minute fair value gap here. I'm gonna go ahead and keep that marked. And then we also have a big one below us right here. So these are the most significant things that I see right now on the chart regarding fair value gaps. Well, what happened when we got into this first fair value gap here on the 15-minute, right? Let's just say this wasn't here yet. What happened when we got into it? Well, we momentarily respected it. And look, when we respected it, we bounced, right? So this is areas you can look for trades, right? Wait till price gets into a fair value gap. See if you get an entry model. If you get one, you take the trade. If you don't take the trade. It's that simple. So bearing that in mind, we had this 15-minute resting above here. Look what price ended up doing once we decided what we wanted to do with this fair value gap. Boom. This is real-time live price action. Look what happened. Price got up to here, and you see the amount of hesitancy price had, right? We started chopping around a little bit. We formed all these wicks just for us to dump ultimately, respecting the fair value gap. So fair value gaps are very powerful. You can use them on every time frame. The general rule of thumb is the higher the time frame, the more weight that it carries. But this is what you want to do with these fair value gaps. It does get a little bit more involved than that when it comes to fair value gaps. But the first thing I want you to do for your homework for this lesson is go through your chart and just start marking every fair value gap that you can. Okay. Just get used to seeing how they form. I'll do one with you right now. Let's do a little bit of the homework, right? So pay attention to one price leg at a time. So this is a price leg right here, this whole move. And go through and mark the fair value gaps that you see. And you're going to notice some things. So this one's actually a really good example. But look at these fair value gaps, right? You technically have a fair value gap here. You see, even though it's a baby, you have a little bit of fair value gap there. You have one here. You have one here, right? And what do you notice? On all the big candles, right? They have fair value gaps. And then you also have one here, right? And that's going to be your homework assignment. Go through and mark fair value gaps to death. And then start observing, right? Play price forward and observe how price respects these things. Look at this. Price respected this little baby right here. Maybe it comes back up to this one eventually. Maybe it doesn't. But see how price, yep, there it goes. Okay. See how price respects. Look at this. Price launched up to that shit and held it. Look at that, man. And what are you noticing too, right? It's paying a little bit more attention to the bigger ones versus the smaller ones. And this is something you want to keep in mind when you're in a trade, is that when you're in, let's say we're in a price like this, and let's say price starts to reverse like this. And let's say you're just trying to find price targets. Well, originally, you're probably going to go for this, right? Because you're like, okay, that's the most obvious high on the way. But what you really need to be paying attention to are the fair value gaps on the way inside here, because those are more or less going to be your pit stops, right? If I'm in a long here and I'm in a trade, I'm ultimately going for that target. Let's say my stops are at this low. These fair value gaps may be areas where I want to trim on the way, because price, for all I know, even though it looks really good for upside, it can come up to this thing, respect it, and then completely reverse on me. And just me knowing that is powerful, because in this area here, I could have taken a trim here. I could have taken some profits here. Like, it's really going to help you understand where you need to take profits. And it's really going to help you understand where price could have a reaction, because that's all stock trading is, right? We wait till price gets to certain areas. We key off on the reaction, and then we look to make some money. So that's the main lesson with fair value gaps. Now, I do have a more in-depth lesson on this in my Discord. You're welcome to join it. We also have a trial in our Discord if you want to feel things out. But that's going to cover the gist for fair value gaps. In future videos, you're going to start seeing how fair value gaps intertwine with other concepts. But it's important that you at least get the basic concept of fair value gaps. Go to your chart, do the homework, start finding these things, because it's going to take chart time. Start finding them. Learn to recognize high quality versus low quality. Learn the difference between respecting and disrespecting, and you'll be on your way. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, guys. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll catch you in the next one.